What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. I'm going to break down what news is coming out for the week that could cause some high volatility. What I see moving forward looking at the current charts. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link that's down below or use my QR code right here to sign up. If you sign up for Moomoo with the link down below and deposit $100, you're going to get $20 of free Nvidia stock. If you deposit $2,000 or more, you're going to get $50 worth of Nvidia plus a $100 cash reward. Deposits $10,000 or more to get $300 worth of Nvidia plus $100, or deposits $50,000 or more to get $1,000 of free Nvidia stock plus $100. You're also going to qualify for an 8.1% APY non-invested cash, and the offer ends very soon. So please use my link down below to sign up. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the markets. So, right off the bat, you'll see that the market is looking more bullish overall because we have invalidated this head and shoulders that was developing on SPY. Instead of getting a big rug pull after CPI, the market continued to bounce and is looking more bullish. We ended up breaking structure and invalidating that trend. Simultaneously, when you look at the chart right here, you'll see that SPY had this low down here. We bounced, we made a higher low and bounced, and we're still making higher lows as time goes on. So could we go a bit higher? It's possible we try to push a bit more. However, there is a very common trend on SPY. We have a tendency of leaving gaps as we go higher, so we do like to dip to fill those gaps before continuing to go higher again. And that's what SPY has been doing for the last couple of days, right? There is a gap over here at 665, for example, last week. SPY gapped up, it pushed higher. Then we came back down to fill the gap on Wednesday of last week. Then we start to squeeze again. We also gapped up through CPI, and we still have that gap to fill, which makes me suspect the possibility of us coming back down to fill this gap before potentially getting another bounce again, just like that. But that is what our trend is suggesting thus far. But once again, guys, whether or not we see a big pullback or not also depends on lots of news. But for now, the chart remains more bullish on SPY. On the QQQ, we also have this gap all the way down here around that 611 area. We're going to see if we go a bit higher from here, but then we could still turn back down to fill that gap. And that might be another buying opportunity for a very bullish November and December, right? Historically, we went over the data in my video from yesterday that typically November and December are more bullish months for the markets. And there's a good chance the market's going to remain bullish during that period. We will see if we get one more pullback to fill this gap and if we do get a bigger move down or not. But as of right now, the trends look more bullish. So let's talk about what's happening with the news. We have some news that came out from Walter Bloomberg that China and the US have reached a trade consensus. Now, he's not specifically going over the fact that this means it's a new trade deal that's confirmed or that it's going to just basically be done with everything. Instead, this is kind of like implying that there is going to be a big discussion that's been covering export controls and many other measures. And we could be looking for delays in the regulations. That is the very, very big thing that's worth talking about. There could be delays in these export controls by a year. On top of this, things are making a lot of progress. As of right now, that is what this is kind of like telling us. But we don't necessarily have confirmation that there's a massive trade deal yet, although progress is being made. I want to make that as clear as possible. That's what you have to remember. Simultaneously, there has been some reports right here that there's been a very productive meeting so far, as there's been a lot of talks between the US and China, and we're going to once again have President Trump and President Xi Jinping of China once again meet up this week. So that's going to be some very important news. The US also has its trade representatives who are continuing to negotiate. And so far, we're seeing some news that trade has been very productive so far. Negotiations are going very, very well. And there could be a massive, massive deal coming very soon. President Trump also said that there's going to be a massive trade deal. So get ready for that as well. On top of this, the US and Vietnam also agreed to the framework of an agreement on a reciprocal, fair, and balanced trade deal. So far, there's more good news coming out. So all of this is more optimistic for the markets, especially as we're getting very close to FOMC. I would not be surprised if the market tries to go a little bit higher on this news. However, it also depends on other specific details. So keep in mind that for tomorrow, it's going to be Monday, October 27th at 11:30 a.m. We just have a couple of bill and note auctions coming out, and that's pretty much it. There's nothing else that's too crazy. We also have the Dallas Fed manufacturing numbers at 10:30 a.m., but that's quite minor data. Nothing too crazy comes out for Monday. On Tuesday, that's when we have the Richmond Fed data. That's going to be more significant, might cause some volatility on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, we have the notorious FOMC meeting when the Fed is going to give us a 25 basis point cut. But then it also depends on what Jerome Powell and the Fed say. They could be talking about the possibility of quantitative easing, which is a big shift in monetary policy that could cause a big bounce in the markets. So we'll see how it goes. But as of right now, these are the catalysts to watch. There's not really much for tomorrow, just some volatility at 10:30 a.m. and 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. On top of this, there's not really much for earnings tomorrow. It's going to be very quiet with lots of retail. But for Tuesday, that's when things get very serious. We have SoFi and PayPal all announcing earnings alongside United Health Group. And then we also have on Wednesday, Verizon and Boeing in the morning. And then after market close, we have Meta, Microsoft, and Alphabet, followed by Thursday having Amazon, Apple, and Coinbase. So big earnings are going to be coming out in the next couple of days. So be ready, guys. That's super important. On top of the CPI was not too bad. I mean, it did go up a little bit for all items, but core did come down. And this was as expected. So hopefully we see CPI kind of like cool off as time goes on, at least from here. This is decent news approaching FOMC. There's a 97.3% chance we get a 25 basis point cut. And don't forget, this Wednesday is when we have the notorious FOMC meeting. So expect a lot of volatility for the week. Last but not least, the fear and greed index is currently at fear. That's making up the majority of sentiment. Momentum is at greed right now. That's starting to climb up. And then the put to call option ratio is starting to reject as we're seeing puts being closed. That's also helping the market go higher. The VIX is also dipping, which is another good sign. So for now, the charts do remain more bullish. Later on during the week, we also have President Trump meeting up with Xi Jinping. That could also cause some high volatility. As of right now, the chart is more bullish. But notice one thing about SPY before we do go any higher. We do like to return to fill our gaps. SPY has been doing that. So for example, right, we got this massive dump that happened when President Trump announced the potential tariffs on China, right? Then we gapped up, we pushed higher, then we came back down to fill the gap, then we pushed back up again. We also had a gap up over here before we dumped again. And then recently, what happened was on Monday, October 20th, okay, the market gapped up. We went a little bit higher, then we came back down to fill the gap, then we bounced again. Then last Friday we gapped up again. We have a huge gap left on SPY here, which makes me suspect that that's history could repeat itself. We could go a little bit higher, it's very possible, but I would like to see us return to fill this gap. And once the gap is filled, SPY may continue to be bullish heading into November, and then we may be continuing to squeeze towards the 700s by the end of the year, right? A move like that is what we could be getting ready for. Now, I could change my mind. I could turn bearish if we start breaking structure. Again, we need to lose essentially, first off, 666 needs to break right over here where the 20 EMA is. Then we also have to lose 658, which is near the 50 EMA, right? We need to lose our key supports. We haven't lost any key support. We're continuing to trend higher. We got this big dump with President Trump's announcements of the tariffs on China, where the market's making a full recovery because President Trump is telling us that there's been a lot of progress to be made with the trade deals. And simultaneously, the Fed's tonality is what's really helping the markets. The market remains very, very resilient. So for now, we're bullish, right? We're making higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows. And the common trend is that we do like to dip to fill the gaps before we try to bounce and go higher. So that's all I can really tell you. The best thing to do is just make that adjustment. The big pullback, it's still possible it comes, but it's not looking as likely now. It looks like this was the big pullback on SPY. Of course, I could change my mind in case something happens, but as of right now, that's what it looks like. Now, heading into tomorrow, it's possible we go a little bit higher, but it might just be a temporary pump because we still have that gap to fill. We could still return towards the previous all-time highs or a little bit below them before we potentially bounce and continue this rally. That's another big possibility. But for tomorrow specifically, let's focus on these levels. So if SPY ends up failing at this support at 675, I think we could fill the gap back down towards 672 or below if 675 fails us. If we're bullish, however, when we break past 678, we're looking for new all-time highs. 680 and the low 680s are likely coming next. I think that as of right now, we're bouncing very nicely. We held up very, very well on Friday, and SPY is going to attempt all-time highs again. And then we're going to see if we turn back down afterwards. But as of right now, I don't really have confirmation of that until we get some kind of break. So we do like to gap up and go a little bit higher before we turn back down. I wouldn't be surprised if SPY tries to break all-time highs and pushes closer to like 680 or the low 680s before this ends up turning back down, before it starts to return in the upcoming days to fill our gap. We might return to fill this gap soon, 672. And if we do dip lower, it would be another buying opportunity for us to continue this rally heading into November and December. Remember that November and December are historically very bullish months. I went over the monthly chart on SPY in the QQQ in my video from yesterday. So please check out that video if you guys want to see what the charts look like on a monthly basis. But historically, the end of the year does tend to be bullish for the stock market. I went over the charts the last 5 years. Most of the time, we do tend to squeeze higher. So there's a good chance we're going to continue to run. So I would like to see a move like this. We basically climb a little bit higher before we turn back down, but watch your levels just to be safe, and we'll see if that ends up happening to SPY or not. Now, on to the triple Q, the same thing is basically going on. SPY and the QQQ have almost identical charts because they are running on a very similar algorithm, the algorithm that dictates their price action and the way at which they move. So, what do I see about this? Well, notice that the QQQ, it's very simple. We dumped really hard, right? See right here, we gapped up where my cursor is. We gapped up. We dumped back down to fill the gap. We pushed back up. We also got another gap over here. We got another double bottom before it started to squeeze. We also gapped up from like this 602 area, I believe. So right here, the QQQ ended up at 602. We gap up and run back up to 612. We get this big dump to fill the gap. Then we rally again. Then we also gapped up over here around 612, went higher. So I do think we could try to go a bit higher on the QQQ, but then I would like to see us come back down to fill that gap, taking us back down to the 610s, maybe a little bit lower. And then we could be looking for that big rally to close off the year. We could be starting the big squeeze towards new all-time highs back to the 620s and 630s very soon. So what's my prediction? Let's go over the levels real quick, then I'll talk about what I think is going to happen. As a reminder, on the daily time frame, the triple Q has a giant gap to fill back down towards 610.5, so the 610s essentially. So if we're bullish, you want to see us basically break and hold above this 618 area. If that holds, the 620s are likely going to come next. 620 plus is very possible. If we're bearish, you want to see us essentially fail at 615. If that fails us, right, then we could be retesting the previous all-time high near 600 and it's near 611. And then we're going to see if we bounce off that or not to see another recovery move. Now, for me to be really bearish, I want to see us lose this 50 EMA. We need to lose like 606. Resistance becoming support at 606 to 605, and then we could be dumping lower. So watch and see how things end up going as time goes on. That's going to be very key for us. So on the QQQ, I would not be surprised if we actually push towards the 618 to 620 zone. I think we go a little bit higher with all this positive Chinese news about how there's going to be a deal with the US and China. There's been lots of positive news over the weekend and with earnings coming out and lots of optimism associated with FOMC. There's a good chance we go a bit higher for a day or two, back up towards all-time highs. But then I wouldn't be surprised if we do get some kind of pullback move. I'm not going to promise it. Watch for confirmation, of course. But it would be very healthy for us to get another pullback to fill that gap, retest these EMAs down here, and then eventually we try to bounce heading into November and we see new highs again for November and December. That is what could be coming. I would like to see a move like that. Now, on the IWM, this is a little bit different. We still have this giant gap down here to fill. Not sure if we go down that low. To me, it's kind of rejecting, but it might go a little bit higher before it turns back down. It looks like we could be forming a double top here. So unless we break 252.5 to be bullish, we could consolidate here, then dip back down towards 245. Then we're going to see if we get some kind of bounce or not. So give this some time. On ES, we're technically on an uptrend, but there is support down here at 67.80. So we're going to see what happens as time goes on. As you can tell, we have this like bearish divergence. Are we going to break out higher? We could try to push a little bit higher for like 68.40 or so. But as time goes on, I would like to see us retrace a bit. And we're going to be looking for these EMAs to be retested, taking us back down towards, the previous all-time highs or even below them, right? We could be dipping a little bit. And then we're going to be looking for a big bounce near 67.50 to continue this run to make new highs. On NQ, we have a bearish divergence. There's also a gap down here, so we're going to see what happens as time goes on to fill this gap. There's this gap over here at 25,250 on NQ, which is a little bit below the all-time high, but the 4-hour and the daily still look more bullish. So this is still favoring upside. We need to see us basically lose this supply zone right here, where this rectangle is, 25,400 or so for us to dip down to fill that gap. I do think that we're going to try to go a little bit higher for 25,600. We turn a little bit lower. And I would like to see us come back down to fill the gap first before we continue a big run higher. But overall, I think the market is going to remain bullish, especially because Jerome Powell might announce quantitative easing very soon. Just him saying that is enough to get the market to explode. That is very possible. Bitcoin looks more bullish. We actually have an inverse head and shoulders like pattern. Unless we lose 106,000, we're looking more bullish. Now, could we dip a bit? It's possible we end up retesting 110,000, but then we could be looking for a nice rebound and a push back up towards 117,000, just like this. So there is some upside potential, in my opinion. On Tesla, Tesla looks like it might dip a little bit. There was some negative news about another probe from the NHTSA that came out. I would like to see us get back above 446 to continue to go higher. Tesla might dip a little bit more for like 425 and then consolidate. But notice as we touch 420, we like to bounce. As we hit 450, we like to reject. So we might be in a consolidation for now. And we're going to see if we come back down to 397 or not to fill the gap. But the thing is, every time we're dipping a bit on Tesla, we just keep on getting bought back up. So if we do get some kind of pullback move, it's nothing more than a buying opportunity. And then I do think that Tesla will eventually get ready for a big run towards the end of the year to continue this rally for the all-time high. So could Tesla run more? Yes, but we're going to see if we dip a little bit tomorrow for 425 before we try to bounce. As we touch 420, Tesla loves to bounce, so we'll see how it goes. Nvidia has a nice looking double bottom right here. It looks more bullish to me, and I think there's a good chance for more upside. There is some downside potential. If we lose 183, we're going to be dumping back down towards 179. As long as we don't lose 179, though, we could kind of like dip here and continue to reaccumulate. And then there's this gap over here. So I think NVIDIA is running for 188 to 190 very soon. So it looks more bullish, especially with the FOMC meeting. We're making higher lows on Apple as long as we don't lose 259 to 255. We're favoring a retest of these EMAs. It might come down a bit before it reaccumulates and continues to break out higher. Now, if we lose 256, I could change my mind. There's also this gap to fill down here, so it's possible we dip a little bit more. We could fill this gap first like this, and then we see like a full V-shaped move and continue to make higher lows. As you can tell, we just keep on making higher lows on Apple, so a move like this is possible. Netflix is looking a little bit weaker to me because we're not holding 1100. We may continue to fall to 1080, a little bit lower, and then we're going to see if we bounce off that or not. On MSTR, we have a nice looking inverse head and shoulders accumulation. However, there is also this gap below, so we're going to see if we come back down towards 280 before we end up bouncing and we look for another rebound. On Celsius, we have a nice looking accumulation here. As long as we don't lose 62.98, we're going to be favoring a pushback up to 64 plus as it looks more bullish. Supermicro, excuse me. This is also looking bullish. It needs to basically form a bottom at 47. As long as we could form a bottom, we're going to be looking for a nice reaccumulation. Reclaim 49.6, and we're looking for a big bounce. I think it might attempt to bounce if we could hold that low. Palantir looks a little bit more bullish. We'll see what happens with earnings season. There is a tough resistance near 186. Could come down to 180 before it tries to bounce and break out higher. So watch that very, very carefully. I think that's going to be very key for how we end up moving. A few more. I'm going to be kind of quick with the rest of these. Rivian has a quadruple bottom. It's range bound between 1321 and 1250. So I think we consolidate for now, not really doing much. SoFi looks more bullish, favoring 30 as our potential targets. AMD is making higher lows here. We're going to be favoring 260 as our target. It looks more bullish to me. As long as 240 does not break, we're looking bullish. ARM has a nice looking double bottom here. It could retest 166 before it tries to break out for 175. There is some downside risk before it tries to bounce. An inverse head and shoulders on PayPal is very possible. Could retest 69.24 before it starts bouncing 472. Coinbase has a nice looking double bottom. As long as we don't lose 341, we're going to likely reaccumulate and continue to break out towards 370. But overall, I think we're looking more bullish. On Amazon, we have a nice looking inverse head and shoulders. If we end up losing 219, we're going to be dumping a lot harder. But as long as we hold these EMAs, we could kind of dip here, then try to bounce. I think approaching earnings, we could be looking for a 227 run. Meta has a nice looking double bottom. As long as we don't do 732, we're going to be favoring 745. Google looks more bullish as well. It might retest 258 before it tries to bounce again. And then Microsoft looks more bullish, favoring 526 as we look more bullish. Oracle could retest essentially 280 flat before it tries to bounce, but I do see a little downside here. 280 to 276 could be tested before it tries to bounce again and start running for 292. Finally, the VIX is looking more bearish. We're going to see if this falling wedge pans out or not. But honestly, guys, they don't always pan out. And the VIX is technically dipping right now. There's also a gap, I think, down here in the 15s that's going to get filled. So for now, I'm not going to worry too much about this. I think that the market might go a little bit higher first, especially with the dollar dipping and other factors like that. But there is going to be likely some kind of pullback move coming later on, a small one. It's not going to be that big. Every time we pull back, we just get completely bought back up. So we might go a little bit higher tomorrow on SPY, looking for new all-time highs temporarily. But then I would like to see us come back down to fill the gap that was left from Friday, the CPI gap. And then I'd like to see a big bounce heading into November. I think the market's going to remain more bullish now, especially as we're breaking structure. The QQQ may go higher tomorrow. We're going to be looking for 618 to 620 as our targets, but we could still turn back down to fill the gap towards 611. The 610 to 611 range, I think, could get retested within a week or two from now. And then once we fill that gap, we're looking for another big run. And I think November and December are likely going to be more bullish. With that being said, I want to thank you all so much for listening. Please enjoy the rest of your guys' weekends. And I'll be back tomorrow before market open for another update. Until then, I wish you all nothing but the best and peace out.